Namaste, welcome back to another episode on Tattvabodha. Tattvabodha is a Prakarana grantha of Advaita Vedanta. It is an introductory text that has definitions, terms that are used in the framework of Vedanta. You see, Vedanta is a way of explaining the nature of the world, the Swarupa and Swabhava of this Jagat is explained through a certain way, through a framework of philosophy, of spirituality, however you call it, called Vedanta. And it has certain technical terms. This textbook called Tattvabodha introduces us to these technical terms and at the same time explaining what is the meaning behind them. So, start off with Guru Vandana. Ajnana Timirandhasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Ajnana Timirandhasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Chakshuhu Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We will see the meaning of this in another class, another session. But for now, let's move on to the Mangalacharanam. Mangalacharanam of Tattvabodha. Vasudevendra Yogendram Natva Jnanapradam Gurum Mumukshunam Hitarthaya Tattvabodha Abhidiyate. Up until now, we have seen who is an Adhikari, and that is the first chapter. The second chapter is right now, we are in the second chapter. It is called Atma Tattva Viveka. Atma Tattva Viveka. In this, we have seen what is a Sthula Shariram, what is a Sukshma Shariram. Last session, we ended with Sukshma Shariram Kim. What is Sukshma Sharira? Apanchikruta Panchamahabhutaihi Kritam Satkarmajanyam Sukadukadi Bhoga Sadhanam Pancha Gnanendriyani Pancha Karmendriyani Pancha Pranadayaha Manaschaikam Buddhischaika Evam Saptadasha Kalabhihi Saha Yattishtati Tat Sukshma Shariram. In this session, we will see two of the terms that are given in this definition of Sukshma Sharira. Pancha Karmendriyani, Pancha Gnanendriyani. Pancha Gnanendriyani. The author starts off with Shrotram Tvak Chakshuhu Rasana Ghranam Iti Pancha Gnanendriyani. See, like I said in the last sessions, Vedanta starts with the self, whereas religion starts with the God somewhere out there. Without knowing who you are, you cannot know who the supreme consciousness or Brahman or God or what have you, or even nothingness behind all this. You cannot understand any of that. So it starts with the self. The Vedanta starts with the nature of the self. In understanding the self, it also understands both the physical, the mental aspects of the self. In this session, the author is talking about one aspect of that physical self called Pancha Gnanendriyani, the organs of perception. Pancha Karmendriyani is the organ of action. You need to perceive something, right? Perceive the world, the Jagat. See, the human body is the product of the Jagat. And it is a modification of the five elements of the Jagat. And one of the modifications is Pancha Gnanendriyani, the organ of perception. It is very interesting. The nature, Prakriti, has created has created humans and other living beings out of its own ingredients, and at the end of the life cycle of these beings, like you, me, everything else, they go back, they dissolve back into nature. It is like a weaving of smoke. We are a product of nature, and therefore we become nature in the end. So, Pancha Jnanendriyani. Shrotram, ear. Tvak, skin, sense of touch. Chakshuhu, eyes. Rasana, sense of taste. Granam, the sense of smell, which is the organ is the nose. These are the 5 organs of perception, or Pancha Jnanendriyani. The author next moves on to describe each organ of perception have an adhisthana devata. Adhisthana devata, or devata means that power of nature that controls each of these organ of perception. There are energy centers in nature which control, which are responsible, which are adhisthana devata, or in other words, presiding deity of each of these organs of perception. Shrotrasya dik devata, the presiding deity of a ear is space. It is very easy to see why space is the dik devata, or the substratum. We can also say it is a substratum or the basis or the foundation of how the ear functions. We know the sound waves travel in space, right? Without space, there is no sound. Sound needs a medium of travel, and that is space. Therefore, the presiding deity of ear is space. Tvachaha vayuhu, tvacho vayuhu. The dik devata of touch is air. Of touch is air. Rasanaya varunaha. The dik devata, the devata, adhisthana devata of, did I miss Chakshuhu Surya? I missed Chakshushaha Surya. The Digdevata of eyes is sun. We know, even science tells us that sun is important for the health of the eyes. Sun gives many things to us. One is, the most important thing is light. Without light, it is darkness. And eyes can only function in light. Whether it is sunlight, which is we call natural light, or artificial light, which is the light we have in our rooms. Regardless, sun is the presiding deity of sight. And Rasanayaha Varunaha, the presiding deity of taste is water, principle of water. Varunaha is the principle of water. See, these are deities, we can say they are the energy centers or the substratums of these energy centers, or they are the principles of these functions of nature. Water, for instance, the principle of water is called Varuna, and this Varuna is the presiding deity of taste. We can tell water is so important for our daily functioning of the body, so they associated with that. And the Granasya, Ashwini Kumarha, Ashwini Kumarau, they are the twins. They are the Dik Devatas for Grana, or the sense of smell. These are all presiding deities of organs of perception. When we say deities or gods, we talk about multiple gods in Hinduism, right? These are all god forms of these energy centers that are already present in nature. If you give a name and a form to these energy centers or the principles of these entities called air, water, fire. You see, these are the Pancha Mahabhutas, right? Space, air, heat, water, all these things, and you give a name and a form to the adhishtan, the principles of these energies, you get an energy center, and that you give a name and a form, you get a devata. That is how Hinduism has so many devatas. It is not as if all these are independent entities. They are all part of nature. They are all part of Prakriti. Now, we have seen so far what are Pancha Gnanendriyani and what are the Adhishtana Devatas of these Pancha Gnanendriyani. Now, moving on, Pancha Karmendriyani. Oh, before that, the author explains what are the functions of these organs of perception. Srotrasya Vishayaha Shabdagrahanam. Tvacho Vishayaha Sparshagrahanam. Chakshusho Vishayaha Rupagrahanam. Rasanayaha Vishayaha Rasagrahanam. Granasya Vishayaha Gandha Grahanam iti. Why is the author describing all the things that we already know? Because he's building a case, he's building a framework to explain how all this happened and what is the relationship between this being or the human in relation to the nature, the Prakriti, and what is the relationship of these two to the one that is responsible for everything, or Brahman, that is responsible, that is a substratum, that is the source of all this. So, Srotrasya Vishayaha Shabdagrahanam. Reception of sound is the function of Srotraha, of the ears. Tvacho Vishayaha Sparshagrahanam. Sense of touch is the function of skin. Chakshusho Vishayaha Rupagrahanam. The perception of Rupa, forms, is the function or Vishaya of eyes. Rasanayaha Vishayaha Rasagrahanam. Rasa means taste. The function of tongue is taste, is perception of taste. Granasya Vishayaha Gandhagrahanam. The recognition of smell is the function or the Vishaya of the nose. So, Pancha Gnanendriyani, Pancha Gnanendriyanam Adhishtana Devataha ke tadanantaram Vishayaha ke Srotrasya Tvachoho Chakshushoho Rasanayaha Granasya. For all these organs of perception, what are their functions? Next, moving on, Pancha Karmendriyani. These are organs of action. What are the Pancha Karmendriyani? The author lists them like how he listed organs of perception or Pancha Gnanendriyani. He lists them, he gives their function, and he gives their Adhishtana Devata. Vak Pani Pada Payupasthani iti Pancha Karmendriyani. Vak Pani Pada Payu Upasthani iti Pancha Karmendriyani. Vak, speech, Pani, hands, Pada, legs, Payu, the other end of mouth, which is anus. Upasthani, genitals, genital organs. These are all organs of action. Vacho Devata Vahnihi. He goes on to describe the Dik Devata, the Adhishtana Devatas of each of these. Vacho Devata Vahnihi, the presiding deity of speech is fire. Fire is the presiding deity of speech. Hastayor Indriyaha, Indraha, Hastayor Indraha. For Hasta, for the hands, Indra is the Adhishtana Devata. Padayor Vishnu, for the feet, Adhishtana Devata is Vishnu. Vishnu. Payor Mrutyuhu, Adhishtana Devata of anus is Mrutyu. Of the excretion is Mrutyu. Mrutyu Devata. And Upasthasya Prajapatihi. Upasthasya Prajapatihi iti. The Adhishtana Devata of genitals is Prajapati, because that is where the Praja are being generated, Praja are produced, where biological legacy continues. Karmendriya Devata, iti Karmendriya Devata. These are the presiding deities of the organs of action. Then he goes on to describe the functions of them. Vacho Vishayah Bhashanam, Panayor Vishayah Vastu Grahanam, Padayor Vishayah Gamanam, Payor Vishayah Malatyagaha, Upastasya Vishayah Anandaha iti. Vachor Vishayah, function of organ of speech is to speak. Bhashanam means to speak. Vacho Vishayah, the function of vachaha or of speech, or the organ of speech is to speak. Panayor Vishayah Vastugrahanam, the function of hands is to grasp things, to hold on to things. Padayor Vishayah Gamanam, the function of legs is of course locomotion. Payor Vishayaha Malatyagaha, excretory organ, excretion is the function of this excretory organ or the anus. Upasthasya Vishayaha Anandam, pleasure is the Vishaya of this organ of procreation or genital organ. So, you may be wondering, one more time I am repeating, why go through this effort of describing all the things that we already know. Like I told, it starts with the self. So everything that is related to the self is being described or being mentioned here, because remember, path to self-discovery or self-knowledge, by here when I say self, it is the self with the big S, the Atman, the Parabrahman. The path to that starts with knowing the self. Who am I? And this is part of that exercise. Moving on, the author describes Karana Shariram. What is, in English, they have translated it to causal body. Karana, what causes? Causal body, and therefore Karana Shariram. So let me recap all the things that we have studied so far, or we have examined so far in Tattvabodha. Tattvabodha, as we have seen, is a prakarana grantha. Let me make it very clear. When you look at Vedanta, you are not becoming a Pandit by studying all this. You are not becoming a scholar of Vedanta. That is not the goal ever of Vedanta. The goal of Vedanta always is Tattva Vivekaha, Tattva Vivechanam, to understand the nature of the self, the nature of the Jagat, Jiva, Jagat, Brahma, the triangular relationship between these three. Why do you need to know these three? Because that is what we are made of. We are made up of the elements of nature. We are products of nature. We go back to nature. And what is responsible for all this? Who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? Why do we suffer? Why is there suffering? Why is there polarities in life? all these, the study of all this is Vedanta. You do not understand the nature of self just by becoming a scholar of Vedanta. You have to use yukti, shruti, anubhuti. Shruti, yukti, anubhuti. Shruti is what we are doing. We are examining what is in it, what is in the Vedas, what is in the Vedanta. Veda, Vedanta, Upanishad, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, they are all the distilled essence of all this is Vedanta. And when we study them, we are actually using a certain available knowledge to help us, to guide us, to point us toward the direction, towards the right direction. So that is Shruti. Yukti, you have to use your own intellect. Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho. Only using your intellect, your mind, can you come out of this bondage or get liberated from this bondage called samsara. Shruti, Yukti, Anubhuti. The third one, most important one, is Anubhuti. You have to experience it. You have to get into your innards. All this knowledge has to assimilate in you. It should become you eventually, part of you and ultimately you. So Shruti, Yukti, Anubhuti, without this, there is no Vedanta, there is no self-discovery, there is no self-realization. So with that in mind, that we have started the study or the investigation of a particular grantha called Tattvabodha. We have seen Mangalacharanam, we have seen who is qualified, what are the qualifications of the person who engages in this study or adhikari. And then in the next chapter, we have started Atma Tattva Vivekaha. What is Tattva Viveka? What is Atma? Atma Kaha. The author here gives a very concise definition, but if you unfold and unpack it, you get entire granthas out of it. Sthula Sukshma Sarira Vyatiriktah Panchakoshatitah San Avasthatraya Sakshi Satchidananda Rupas San Yathishtati Sa Atma. Repeating one more time. Sthula Sukshma Sarira Vyatiriktah Panchakoshatitah Avasthatraya Sakshi Satchidananda Rupas San Yathishtati Sa Atma. The entire rest of the grantha tries to explain all the terms in this one definition of Atma. So in the next session, we shall continue with Karana Shariram. What is a Karana Shariram? And then continue with the terms and the descriptions of all the Karana Shariram. So we have seen Sthula, Sukshma, and now we are in the Karana Shariram. Till we meet next time, if you have some time, you can download Tattva Viveka from internet. It is available in many English translations. And if you have that in front of you, you can follow along with me. Otherwise, you can just listen to what I'm saying. So till we meet next time, stay healthy and stay safe. Namaste.